Again, and next we're going to look at a space where SwiftUI really is awesome and well designed and well supported, and that is in user input. So we're going to make it so that you can, there's tons of stuff around being able to type things in, be able to slide things, pick things, that sort of kind of picker type functionality, all really well supported inside of SwiftUI. And it's a really good example of how bindings work from SwiftUI, which we'll get into. And so we're going to specifically build a little app that helps us do tip calculation. It's really simple math, but really some interesting interface opportunities. And so we'll kind of explore some of those. And so we're going to start off with a single view application. I'm going to give mine a name that makes sense to me, but probably doesn't make sense to you. So you can name it with yours or whatever you want. The important thing here is that user interface is set to SwiftUI, not storyboard. That's crucial. We'll hit next, build it. And I am demoing on a smaller screen than I normally do, and that's intentional so that you guys, so that the text is a little bigger inside of YouTube. I noticed that was potentially a problem for y'all. Oh, sorry. I don't know why I did it that way. There we go. Because I'm kind of working in this smaller real estate, I'm going to turn off some stuff. So, for instance, I'm only going to be building one single page where the tip calculation is all going to happen on one page. So I just need to look at content view.swift. So I don't need this stack of files. So I'm going to highlight that. And I'm not going to do a lot of tweaking of individual settings over here. So I'm going to turn that panel off as well. And so it gives me a little bit more real estate to work with. All right, so if we're going to be doing a tip calculator, the first thing we need to do is figuring out how much the bill is. And so I'm going to replace this hello world text with a label that just says bill. And so we'll put the input, the text input into that. Now, before we do that, what's crucial is understanding in Swift there's this concept of bindings. And what that means is that if one variable is bound to a input, like a text input, when you type into that text input, you don't, as a programmer, need to say, hey, what they just typed in the text input, put that into a variable. Instead, what will happen is those will automatically become bound to one another. And so if you change the variable programmatically, it'll change in the view to the user. And if the user changes it by typing it in or clicking on something, then it'll automatically change inside the variable as well. This is very useful and very helpful, but is also very different than how we've worked up until this point. And so we can't just go and make a text field. The first thing we need to do is create a variable that's going to hold that's going to be bound to this text view. And so what I'm going to do that is outside of the body. So this is the body. This is everything that the user sees. Outside of that, I'm going to create a new type of variable. And that new type of variable is called a state variable. And that new type of variable is only able to be changed inside the content view. So that variable is not going to be changed. We're not going to get into how else it could be changed, but it's only available to be changed inside a content variable. And so that's called a private variable. Private just means it's only can be messed with here. I'm going to zoom some of this out so you can see it better. And then I'm going to create a variable. So this is a state private variable. And I'm going to call it check amount. And it's going to be a string because users are going to be typing into a field for it. So I'm just going to make it an empty string for now. All right, and so now I have a variable called check amount, and I want to create a interface object that will, when you change the interface object, it'll update check amount. So there's a bunch of interface elements here along with all the other stuff that I get to have. But specifically what I want to do is grab a text field. And I'm going to attach it just like before to the whoops, this isn't running. Drives me crazy how that works. Text field. And I'll attach it to that text that says bill, colon. And so you can see I have a little gray line, which means I'm going to create myself a VStack. And there's two things here. There's one is placeholder. That's the text I want to display to the user before they type anything. And then So this is the text, the placeholder text. You can see right there, it fills it in gray. But then text, this is the binding. So what do you want to be bound between what the user types and what variable? And so I'm going to say I want to bind it to that check amount variable that we used. However, it's not going to be just take the value of, you can see I'm getting an error message right away because I'm missing something crucial. I don't want to just take the value of check amount and dump it into the text field, which would be one way, not a two-way street. So it would be kind of similar to how we've done things in the past where, you know, what's inside the text field is completely different from the variable until the programmer goes and ties the two together. This is saying, hey, text fields are always tied to a variable. What do you want them to tie it to? And I'm saying I want to tie it to check amount. But that's not exactly right. In order to say these things need to be bound together, we start with a $sign. And that means these two things are now tied to each other. It's similar to, you know, when you do an if statement. If you just say x equals 5 and put it in an if statement, that's confusing because to us, equal has two meanings, and we can determine by context clues which meaning you mean. In programming language, you got to say double equals, which means is it equal to? Same thing here. You can declare a variable, but now you have to go an extra mile to say this variable, don't just take the contents of it and dump it, bind those two together. And that little extra bit that we do to say to bind those two together is the $sign. And so now whenever the user types into this text field, check amount will automatically update to hold that whatever they had typed into, which is pretty powerful. So we're going to test it. Unfortunately, print doesn't really work very well inside a SwiftUI, gives us some problems. And so we're going to just have on screen something that will update based on what the user's done. And so I'm going to create another text field. Just normal text, not a text field, sorry. Normal text, and tie it in the same VStack here. And this text field is going to say, like, I don't know, total bill. And it's not just total bill, but now I want to have this text automatically update with whatever check amount is. And you'll see that they're not bound together because there's no changing of check amount happening here. So what's really happening is in real time, whenever the user changes this text field, it will automatically update this variable, and this text field will automatically be updated as well to include the new value of check amount. So that might sound a little confusing until we see it. So let's run it. Running. There we go. All right, so what's the total amount of my bill? Let's say something big. Let's say I went on a huge, epic eating spree and spent $100. You can say instantly, as I type into this, total bill is updating. That is pretty cool, and something that we couldn't really do with the other way we were doing things using storyboards. By binding these things together, they're instantly updating one another. Now this is kind of silly right now because it's just literally spitting out what I had typed in. So we need to do some extra stuff to this. So let's go ahead and make it so that the user can input a tip amount, so how much they want to tip. And then what we'll do is we'll take total amount of bill, so check amount, and we'll multiply check amount times the tip amount to get a new total, which is total amount of the bill. So it's not just the amount that they had gotten billed, but also the total amount that gotten billed plus the tip. So to do that, what we need to do is, and just to save resources for this recording, I am going to quit Simulator, although I tell all of you never quit Simulator. There's no need to. For me, I'm running low on resources with the recording, so we're going to keep things clean. All right. So let's next do segment control for the percentage that they want to choose. And segment controls, you can see, it used to be in storyboards its own little thing, but it's not here anymore. Where is it? Well, have no fear. Segment controls are just a type of picker. And so in SwiftUI, we have pickers, and then we modify those pickers to be different styles of pickers, and we're going to style ours to make it look like a segmented control. So I'm going to drag out a picker. I'm going to drop it here in between the field that the user types in the bill and the total bill that's calculated. And so now I have a picker right here. And you can see by default, pickers look like this. I don't want to do that. I want to have a segment control. And so right out of the gate, the first thing I'm going to do is change the style of the picker. And I want to change the style of the picker. You can see picker style and then style, whatever you want. And specific, the style that I want is called segmented picker style. And so next, my picker will style to, it would help if I spelled segmented properly. Now my segment control, my picker turns into a segment control. It says 1 or 2. The label, you can see that normally would be displayed next to the picker, is no longer a thing when I have the segment control. And so I can go ahead and remove the label. And instead, I want to have that label appear before the selection drop-down thing. So I'm going to put that in the front and say this is going to say tip amount. Actually, my bad. We're going to do that a different way. You can see it has an error, and the error is, hey, selection needs to be tied to something. This doesn't look right. We got to be able to do something with this selection. And so we're going to do the same thing as we did before, where we create a variable, a static private variable, or state private variable, that is going to be the picker percentage that we've chosen. So I'm going to call that tip percentage. And our tip percentage is just going to hold the index in the picker that's been selected. And so that is an int. So I'm going to give it a default state of 0. So it's the first thing that is picked inside of the picker. And so then what I say is, okay, whatever the user makes as a selection, I want that. Forget this constant stuff. We'll talk about that later. I want that to be tied to the tip percentage. And you can see I'm using $sign to bind those two together. I also got an error message that I was not expecting, so give me a second while I debug that. What am I missing? Oh. So localized string key, this is just because I don't have that label anymore. I need to kind of use this in order to make sure that things are accessible and that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to give this a hint to the iPhone as to what this picker is. And so it's a tip amount. There we go. Okay, and so you can see my tip amount can be 1 or 2. It makes no sense to my user, though, because I have bill and then the amount that I type in and then a segment control and then a total bill. And that doesn't like it. What's wrong here? Okay, now it's okay with it. That's a little weird. All right. From a user perspective, this is a little weird. So I need to go ahead and have another little text label similar to bill : to label the picker there. So I'm going to put in another text field. Again, I'm using VSpace, so I have the little gray line appear. So I'm going to tie this to this. I'm going to give this a name. Now, if you look at this, it does not look pretty. You can see that it's actually kind of confusing why these things are centered, these things are left justified, etc. What's cool about SwiftUI is that there's a ton of styling that can be leveraged if I just lean into some features of SwiftUI that we haven't talked about. And that is, you can wrap things similarly to how you wrap stuff in HTML, how you wrap tags around things. And when you do that wrapping, it automatically inherits some styling, similar to if you had some CSS styling. If you used HTML tags properly, the styling from those HTML tags would kind of influence what the thing displays as. And specifically, I can wrap stuff inside of what's called a form. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we're going to say, hey, this big old V stack that I got going on is a form. Whoops. Somehow these got separated into two different V stacks. Let me get rid of that extra one. Okay. So I'm going to say this is a form. This whole thing is a form. Let's do some indenting for my own sanity. And not only is this whole thing a form, but this little part where you put in the bill, that's one section of my form. And then when the part where you put in the tip amount, that's going to be another section of my form. And then total bill down here, that's yet another section. Now I might have one too many closed curly brackets, so let's see if this crashes. Oh, we're good. So now you can see the styling all looks a lot more iPhone-y, kind of automatically. So because I have a form in sections, you can see the sections are kind of grouped together. In form, it tells it to try to draw it this way, which is really, really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with this, building this tip calculator out. And so what I'm going to do is say, all right, let's go ahead and start tagging these suckers. So tag means when the user selects it, what do you want the value to be? So what's that mean? So I'm going to start off by saying, okay, you can have 0% tip if you're a horrible person. And that's going to be the 0th index inside of this segment control. I can also have, if you had select, you could do 5%. That'll be the first one. You can do 10%. That'll be the second one. You can do 15. You can do 20%, which if you're a good person is the starting point. Sorry, I have strong opinions about tipping. And then because we're all living in the world that we're living in right now, and people that get tipped are probably struggling a lot, let's go ahead and say you can go up to 25%. All right, sweet. So now I have a picker that is not styled like a picker. It's styled as a segment of control, and you can choose these different things. So let's go ahead and test it. Again, I love to test. Do some coding, test, do some coding, test, just to make sure that I'm not blowing anything up. And I can type in my bill and say it's $100, and the bill automatically fills in here because I'm not using tip amount yet. And I can change these sliders. Sweet. Okay. Now let's go ahead and actually do the math. So what I want is tip amount to impact the total amount that's in the bill. So right now I'm saying total bill is check amount. Well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. What I need to do is make it so that I have a new variable that is automatically calculated and is automatically calculated based on what some users have done already. Now normally in the other version of Swift that you're used to, this would call for a function. So you get the total bill that's been typed in, you get the percentage, and then you'd have like a button that would be like calculate tip. And then that little button would either run inside of its own action, would run a function, or you have a separate function that does all the calculation for you. In SwiftUI, we can actually make it so the variables do the calculation for us. So the variable actually contains a function. So by that I mean I can make a variable outside of my view up here that will automatically do all that calculation for me. So I'm going to create a variable called total per person, and it's going to be a double. Double is just a type of math that allows me to do things like multiply and divide. And I'm going to have it return a value. So right now we'll say it's going to return 0.0, just for sanity's sake. If you don't remember what return is similar to using return inside of a function, which just means, hey, do a bunch of stuff, and once you do it, kick this thing back out. So what this is going to do is whatever return is will automatically get put into total per person, into that total per person variable. Now, this seems kind of silly right now. Why can't I just say total per person equals 0.0? And by the way, the reason it's 0.0 is that you have, for doubles, you have to be explicit and go into have the something dot something in order to be a double. But I could do that. However, in a moment, we're going to make this return value automatically calculate based on the total bill and the percentage. But in order to do that, we're going to just kind of tie all these things together. So total per person is with the variable that I want to display down here. So I just copied it. So instead of saying total bill, whatever the check amount was, I want the total per person. Oh, per person. What am I thinking? I don't want per person. Total after tip. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. And so this is going to be total after tip. It doesn't like something. Why don't you like that? Oh, because it expected a string. So we're going to do our normal string trick, which is we're going to take our double and convert it into a string. This is not new. That is just standard issue Swift. And so now it's going to convert the bill. And so if I were to run this right now, I'm not going to bother with it, but well, we can hit resume. It's going to, the total bill will just say total bill colon 0.0 because that's what's being returned. But I'm going to do a little bit of math up there in total after tip and take what the total amount was, take the percentage for the bill, or the percentage for the tip, and multiply the two together. So we're going to first create a variable that we're only going to use inside of total after tip. And so this variable will never be changed. And so that's a great opportunity for let. And I'm going to call it user tip selection. So this is the selection that the user has made. And what it's going to do is take tip percentage up here, which if you remember, tip percentage is just the index of this. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to take the tip percentage index and use it to figure out which one of these they've chosen. So if you think about it, this is a great opportunity for math, because if this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, the difference between each one of these is just 5%. So to figure out which percent they had chosen, I could do some if statements, but that gets a little hairy. Instead, I can just do some simple math. If this is 0, then the tip percentage is just 0 times 5. So that's 0. When it's 1 times 5, it's 5. When it's 2 times 5, it's 10. When it's 3 times 5, it's 15. And when it's 4 times 5, it's 20. And when it's 5 times 5, it's 25. So I can just use just simple math here to make these, to figure out which one they have chosen. And so I'm just going to take the index that they had, which is tip percentage, and I'm going to multiply it times 5. Now the problem is tip percentage is an int, and so I can't do this multiplication. It needs to be turned into a double. And now user tip selection will do some sweet math for me. It doesn't like something. What doesn't it like? Oh, because I deleted the return from before. So for now, we'll return the user tip selection. But soon we're going to make it so it's not just what the user had selected, but it's other stuff. I'm returning it now so I can do a really simple check. So I'm going to run it. And so now this should say 0.0. When I choose this one, it should say 5.0, 10.0, 15.0, 20.0, 25.0. Great. The problem is if I want to use this as a percentage, this is not converted to a percentage. So you remember this from, middle school math class. If you want to make something turn from a normal number like 5 into 5%, you need to divide it by 100. Run it again. And so now this should say 0.0, 0.05, 0.1, 0.15, 0.2, 0.25. Sweet. So now I have the user's tip selection properly populated. And so now what I'm going to do is actually get the total bill. So I'm going to make a new variable called let that doesn't get changed, but let is a good opportunity for that. And this would be like total bill. So this is not just the check amount, but this is the check amount plus the user's tip selection. So we're going to say get the total bill is going to take check amount. We'll come back to that in a second. And I'm going to return total bill. So again, I'm just double checking myself to make sure that I'm good. The problem with this is that total bill is a string because users type into it. So we need to convert our string into a double. And inevitably, a user in theory could type in to the bill a letter, and so that would break this double conversion. And so what I need to do is say, hey, if it's not a number that they typed into, just give it a default value of 0. So just make it so that this thing doesn't do any math at all if the user's typed in something else other than a number. And so this will convert the string into a double. And if it fails at converting the string into a double, it'll just make the total bill set to 0. So now we're good to go. All right, so you can see if I run it, it's just going to be whatever the user typed in. Okay, and so now we need to do the hard work of taking the amount that the user typed in, which I'm calling total bill, and multiply it by user tip selection, and then add total bill again. So, create another variable called amount to pay, and we're just going to take total bill, multiply it times user tip selection, and add total bill to it. So this is going to take the total bill. Let's say the total bill was $100. It's going to take $100 times the user tip selection. So if they had selected 5%, then this amount will be $5 because 100 times 5% is $5. And then it's going to add the total bill back in. So your total amount that you need to pay is $105. And it's going to return not total bill, but amount to pay. Let's check it. So if I want to pay, or if the bill is $100 and I want to pay a 5% tip, it says 105 is the total amount to pay. Sweet. It's doing exactly what I want. Awesome. So I want you guys to grab this, make sure you understand it, play around with it a little bit, and then what we'll do is add an extra layer of functionality. We'll make it so that you're not just calculating total tip, but you're also calculating the total bill with the tip, and what happens if you need to split the bill across multiple people. And that's be our next video.